Back when Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted released in 2019, the community pretty much agreed that this was easily the scariest game in the entire franchise. Being inside a VR environment of the original pizzerias brought a completely new look as to how terrifying it would be to actually work in one of those locations. The animatronics were no longer just 2D images, but massive robots which would be standing right in front of you. However, the most talked about levels weren't the VR remakes of the first 3 games, but were instead the unique ones, with Parts and Service being the most iconic and memorable one of them all. Taking inspiration from Night 3 of Sister Location, Parts and Service has the player up close to the classic 4 animatronics while performing different tasks to complete the game. However, if even the smallest task is done slightly wrong, the minigame will instantly end with a jump scare. Starting with Bonnie, then Chica to Freddy and Foxy, each Parts and Service level is completely different from the last, which is going to make recreating these minigames in Minecraft just as fun and challenging as any other project. Now, even though Help Wanted only has 4 of these levels, I think it would be a fun idea to turn this into a mini-series where I not only make Minecraft versions of the official levels, but to also make custom Parts and Service levels for each of the animatronics from every FNAF game. This would not only be a way for me to put my own spin on things, but to also see how repairing animatronics in different FNAF locations would work. So without any more further ado, let's get started with this project and see how I can make this work in Minecraft. First things first, I actually need to build the play area that I'm going to be inside during the gameplay. Now, while all of the Parts and Service minigames take place inside a black void, I'm going to be using some creative freedoms and make each level a fully decorated room while still having the main play area be the priority. And since the Help Wanted minigames are set in FNAF 1, I've used the same blocks as my original FNAF 1 build to decorate the surrounding area. You can see where I've used different building techniques for different props, with the most obvious one being these custom player heads here. Now, you'll notice that some of them are much bigger than the others, and that's because I'm finally playing in version 1.21.1 where the scale attribute is now a thing that I'm able to use. So by using this command here, I'm able to change the size of any entity so that way I can give different objects the right proportions and make even more detailed models. Speaking of which, I next need to add the Bonnie model itself, as the minigame can't really start without it. Now, I went back and forth deciding whether I wanted a single armor stand as the base model like how all of my other maps have worked, or if I wanted to make a bigger model that would be more like what's seen in game. And as you can tell by the size of this model, I went with the second option, which I think was definitely the right choice. Like always, I still prefer using armor stands for this, as I find it a lot more Minecraft-like than if I were to just import a custom model by using block displays. This is of course just a personal preference of mine, but I'm still able to recreate a detailed model regardless. Once again, I've used the scale attribute to make Bonnie a lot bigger than I am instead of just being the size of a normal armor stand. Now, this is good for 2 reasons, as it now makes Bonnie a lot more intimidating, but more importantly, it gives me a lot more room to add interaction prompts around the model, so that way I'm able to start and complete the different tasks. So taking a look at those tasks, the first steps are to remove Bonnie's eyes from his endoskeleton and then to open up the faceplates by pressing 2 buttons on either side of his head. Now, starting with the first step, the way I've set up a prompt to interact with Bonnie's eyes is by putting a baby zombie in front of each one. This might look and sound a bit weird, but I can have a command block detect when one of those mobs takes damage, which is then going to send an output and power the next system needed. I've used this method many times for some of my previous projects, and I'm going to keep on using them as not only are they easy to set up, but they also work really well. This is all a joke, by the way. I'm not going to be using baby zombies anymore. Since I'm playing in version 1.21, a lot of convenient commands and entities have been added that I wasn't able to use in 1.20.4. The scale attribute command was one of them, but another really cool feature are interaction entities. I'm very late to explaining this, but for those of you that don't know, these invisible entities will cause the command block to power if I hit them by left clicking, or if I interact with them by right clicking. And the detection system itself isn't even that complicated, as all it's doing is running an execute command as the entity with a certain tag, and is then either going to look for an attacker or a target. Now, the attacker is going to be me since I'm the one hitting the entity, and the target is then going to be the interaction itself. Now the last two commands up here are just to make sure that the command block is going to stop powering after that by removing either the attack or interaction data from the entity. But the best part about all of this is that interaction entities can also be scaled to whatever size I want, meaning they aren't just limited to being a 1x1 cube. So going back to Bonnie, I've now placed a 0.1x0.1 interaction entity in front of each eye, which means I have to click on that specific area for a command block to send an output. I'm sure I just made the entire command block community happy by finally bringing up interaction entities, as I've seen lots and lots of comments of people almost begging me to use this method. Believe me, I've read all of your comments, and hopefully this makes me look a bit more professional now that I'm finally able to use them. However, with long command block talks aside, the way I'm going to remove Bonnie's eyes is by left clicking over them, which is then going to put the item in my hand and then changes Bonnie's player head to replace the eye that I just removed. Now this is simply done by having the output power and item replace command that's going to swap out the head on the Bonnie armor stand with a different one from inside of this chest. Now there are multiple stages to this, so there's going to be multiple versions of Bonnie's player head, with this first one being where his left eye is removed, and then stage 2 is for when both eyes are removed and both eyes have been replaced with 2 red dots. Now there's also this fourth version of the player head here where Bonnie is just missing his right eye. However, this one isn't going to be seen as much as it's only going to appear during the jump scare if I've removed the eyes in the wrong order. Now to get the order system to work, I've set up a scoreboard which is going to keep track of which eye I interacted with first. So if I grab Bonnie's right eye while the scoreboard is set to 0, this command block is then going to power, which is eventually going to lead to the jump scare. However, if I grab the left eye while the score is set to 0, the scoreboard is then going to be set to 1, so that way the jump scare command isn't going to be able to power once I grab the right eye after taking out the left one. And this is where I'm going to start using a lot of interaction entities, as the next few tasks are going to work in a very similar way. So once I grab Bonnie's eye, a player head version of the item is going to show up in my hand, and then I can interact with the cleaning receptacle to my left and my right. Now this also has an order system, as I need to put the left eye in the left cleaner and the right eye in the right one. And just like before, if I do this in any other order, it's once again going to power the jump scare. The next task is a bit more simple, as it just has 2 interaction entities on either side of Bonnie's jaw for the 2 buttons that then open up the faceplate. Now for the buttons themselves, I've placed 2 tiny armor stands with red concrete on their heads on either side of Bonnie's jaw, and these are going to change to lime concrete once the corresponding interaction has been triggered. Now these buttons don't need to be pressed in a set order, so I don't need to do the same thing as the previous tasks, but instead there's a single scoreboard that's going to increase when I push each button, which is then going to open up the faceplate once the score has been set to 2. Now getting the faceplate itself to open might sound like a complicated thing to do, but not a lot needs to be done for it to still look like Bonnie's face flips back over his head. So to start, I've made a second and slightly smaller armor stand for Bonnie's endoskeleton head, which is going to be hiding inside the main one throughout the entire game. Now once both of these buttons have been pushed and the scoreboard is set to 2, the main armor stand's head rotation is going to change to look up and around, that way it flips over itself and reveals the endoskeleton version inside. And the animation itself is only made up of 3 different frames, as the sequence is supposed to happen almost instantly, meaning we're only going to be seeing this for a fraction of a second. So each frame is powered right after the other one, where the head rotation is slightly increased, so that way it no longer covers up the endo head hiding inside. But now let's go ahead and see this all together now that the minigame is around halfway completed. So the first thing I need to do is take Bonnie's left eye and put it in the cleaner to my left, and do the same thing with the right eye where I pick up the eye and put it in the cleaner to my right. Now once both eyes have been removed, I'm then able to push both buttons on either side of Bonnie's jaw, which is then going to open up the faceplate and reveal the next part of the minigame, where I now have access to the throat pipe and I'm able to retune Bonnie's guitar by pushing this button. Already you can see how useful these interaction entities are, as if I were to just use normal Minecraft mobs again, I would have to have used only a few of them around the model at one given time, as otherwise they would overlap with each other. The only downside that I've come across so far has been on my part, as since the Bonnie model is made up of so many armor stands, lots of their hitboxes get in the way of the interactions themselves. However, to fix this, I just had to simply move each prompt in front of the model a little bit, so that way I'm able to click on each interaction. It might seem like this would make a big difference, however once I'm standing in front of Bonnie again, it's impossible to tell that this is even happening. But now that the faceplate is open, I'm able to press the button inside the throat pipe, which is then going to play through the 5 notes on the guitar string. Now instead of having a sequence of repeaters play each note in a set order, I've set up a scoreboard timer which is going to power each play sound command when the score hits a certain number. So this starts at 90 ticks and is going to power the lowest note first, then 20 ticks after that it's going to power the second note, and so on and so forth until all 5 notes have played. Now at the same time that this is happening, a second command block is going to power, which is going to change the color of the button to correspond with the color of the string with the note that's being played. The next step is to get one of those notes to be randomly off tune, which is what this second system here is going to do. So the moment that the faceplate's open, this randomizer command is going to pick a number between 1 and 5, which is then going to choose the note that's going to be off tune. Now this works by having an execute command at the start of each of these play sound commands, which is going to stop it from powering unless the randomizer has picked a number for that specific note. Instead, one of the commands from the other system is going to power, and is going to play a bass version of the same note to indicate that that's the note that's off tune. To show this off, you can see that the button is going to cycle between the different colors when I click on it, and one of them has been changed to be off tune. Now if I want to listen to it again, I can just push the button again and it's going to replay the exact same sequence while keeping the notes in the exact same tune every time. So to fix the off-tune note, I've placed an interaction in front of each of these colored blocks here, which is going to rotate the armor stand it's connected to whenever I click on it. Now whenever I do this, a new scoreboard connected to each tune is going to swap between 1 or 2 depending which way the armor stand is rotated towards. And this is the scoreboard that's going to power the detection system to decide whether I can move on if I get it right, or to power the jump scare if I get it wrong. Now if I get it right, one of these command blocks is going to power, which first checks to see that the corresponding note was in fact out of tune, and is then going to see if the matching colored block has been rotated. After that, it's then going to send an output when the Bonnie note score matches 90 or less, which means I've pushed the main button to play through the 5 notes again. Now if all of this is true, it's then going to power these 3 command blocks here, which is then going to set this scoreboard to 1 to let the next system know that I got it right, while also placing both of Bonnie's eyes back into the cleaners again, so that way I can pick them up and put them back where I found them. So in the exact same way as before but in the opposite order, I just have to put both eyes back where I found them by clicking on them and then clicking on the socket where they need to go. Then the last step is to push both buttons again to close the faceplates back up, where you can see both of them turn red before Bonnie's main head turns back to normal again. Now just like when I removed both eyes, there is once again a set order to put them back in, is if I were to just put the right eye in before the left one, the game would then end with a jump scare. Now on the topic of jump scares, now that the main gameplay has been all completed, I can now go ahead and add in the jump scare itself, where there's actually a few different ways where it can happen. If I take out the eyes in the wrong order, I'll get jump scared. If I put the eyes in the wrong cleaner, I'll get jump scared. If I push the draw buttons or change the guitar tune when I shouldn't, I'll get jump scared. And of course, if I don't tune the correct note, I will also get jump scared. Instead of using the same model for this though, I've made a second and much smaller Bonnie outside the build which I'll be teleported to whenever I do something wrong. And believe it or not, but the entire jump scare is actually just inside of these 12 command blocks right here, as the animation itself isn't all that complicated. So just like how the guitar notes played, there's a scoreboard timer which is going to count down from 24 ticks, and is then going to play a different frame in the animation when the score hits a certain number. Now what these changes are doing is slightly rotating Bonnie's head one frame at a time, but it's going to look like he's screaming in my face whenever this is all played together. All that's needed after that are the command blocks to reset the game once the jump scare has happened, which is all done inside of these 2 command block chains right here. Now you might have noticed that I used to have a tall command block tower to the side of the top platform, and these are those exact same commands, so I already had everything ready as I was going along. So everything is going to reset once the jump scare timer matches 0, and after that I'll be teleported to a dark room before then seeing the game over screen. Now that's going to be something I'll set up once the rest of the animatronics have been added, so for the time being, these command blocks here are going to teleport me back inside the build, where now I'm able to play the game again from the very beginning. So to see this happen all together, I'll go ahead and remove Bonnie's right eye, where now the jump scare is instantly going to play out. I noticed that Bonnie's head was missing an eye during the jump scare, and that's because the player head is going to change whenever I do a certain task in the wrong way. For example, if I were to change the incorrect tune, the same jump scare animation is going to happen, but this time Bonnie's faceplate is going to be opened while he's missing both of his eyes. It's a small detail that doesn't change any of the gameplay, but it helps put things together a whole lot more. And that finally wraps up all of the gameplay for Bonnie's parts and service level, where the final thing I've now done is added in both the instruction voice lines and the sound effects. Now, since sounds are almost always the final thing that I add, I never really go into detail with how I choose what sounds I want to use for what, so I thought I might as well do that for this build. So here are the 8 different play sound commands which are going to have all of the sounds needed for the entire game, with the first and most important one being for ambience. This is always the first sound that I add, as no matter how good the rest of the sounds are, everything is going to feel dull and boring without there being a constant background noise. Now luckily Minecraft has a bunch of these ambient tracks to choose from, so it's really just up to choosing which one is going to fit best for the game that I'm making. The next noises are the main sounds that are going to play when a certain action is being done. Now the first sound that I added was for taking the eyes out and then putting them back, which are both done by using 2 different button noises, with a lower wooden sound for when I take the eyes out, and then a higher pitched stone sound when I put the eyes back in. I then used an anvil sound for when the eyes are put inside the cleaners, and then an iron golem noise for when Bonnie's faceplate opens up. So because this game has a lot of different robotic and metal objects, the first thing I look for are any heavy metal or iron sound effects, and both of these work really well for this Minecraft recreation. Now these last 2 command blocks here are for the jump scare, as it's important to make sure that it sounds right while also having an impact that catches you off guard. So the FNAF 1 animatronics have a very high-pitched screeching sound, so I've used the horse death sound effect as the main sound that's going to play. Now while this would work very well on its own, I've also added another iron golem noise to play, that way there's a small hint of machinery in the background that also just adds to the impact of the first sound effect. It doesn't play for very long, but the impact sound it makes is really effective. With that being said though, that finally wraps up all of the first parts and service level, which now has a total of only 321 command blocks. Now I know that that's still a pretty high number, but with how much I managed to do while still staying within this small area, I'm really happy with how everything has turned out, and I'm really excited to see how the rest of them are going to work. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and move on to the next parts and service level, with Chica being the next animatronic to look at. The next parts and service level takes place in what I assume to be the FNAF 1 kitchen, where I've once again started with a 12x12 outline and filled in the room with a mix of decorations from Help Wanted, as well as a few custom ones to add in more detail to the room. And while the overall build uses a lot more armor stands than in Bonnie's, Chica herself has the exact same amount as Bonnie, where I was once again able to make a highly detailed model. Since I've already gone over how interactions work and how they change a scoreboard, this level shouldn't take nearly as long to complete as with Bonnie, especially that the first part is pretty much the exact same. However, instead of taking out Chica's eyes, there are 3 slices of pizza around her that can be removed in any order, with one on her knee, one on her bib, and one at the side of her head. And just like with Bonnie's eyes, I just need to right click to pick it up, and then I can place it in the trash can next to me, which is then going to increase the scoreboard at the side of the screen. And also just like the last level, once the first task has been completed, I then have to push a button on either side of Chica's face, which is then going to open up her beak. However, instead of just having the beak open up when the button scoreboard is set to 2, I need to add the animation where Chica lunges forward, which could take a little bit longer to set up. In a surprise twist of events though, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, as all of it is done inside of these 12 command blocks right here. Now I've split it into 2 different rows so that way the command block chain doesn't go on forever, but each one of these command blocks here is teleporting a single armor stand forward and then down slightly, that way all of Chica is going to move towards me at the exact same time. Now there's also some additional commands that rotate Chica's head, as she does slightly tilt her head to the side, which means both the main head and the beak need their own additional command blocks for the animation to work. So with both buttons pushed and Chica's beak now open, the next feature that needs adding are the roaches that start crawling around Chica's face. Now unfortunately, despite how much I dislike bugs, I did actually have to add this as it is a main part of the gameplay for this level. So as you just saw, when a scoreboard timer starts counting up, a tiny armor stand is going to slowly come out of Chica's beak and make its way to the left side of Chica's face. This works by having this command block teleport the armor stand tagged See Chica Bug 1 in this direction relative to its current position. So while the score matches 1 or more, the armor stand is going to keep on moving minus 0.1 blocks to the left and 0.001 blocks up every tick. Now when the scoreboard matches 25, the armor stand is then going to teleport back inside Chica's beak again, that way I can reuse the same animation again and have multiple armor stands looping around Chica's head. And here you can see what that's going to look like with 2 more of the bugs now added. Now once again they're both going to move in a certain direction when their scoreboards start increasing, and will loop back around when the main timer powers the scoreboard in the first place. So on top of the individual timers for each armor stand, there's also a main timer that counts from 1 to 110, and is then going to power one of these 6 command blocks here when the score matches a certain number. Now this is then going to set the score of one of the bugs to 1, which is then going to start increasing the scoreboard and is going to cause the individual timers to start moving the bugs around. Now to deal with the bugs, I've set up a new interaction over the Chemispray button, which is then going to power a few different things when I press it. First, some green particle effects are going to come out of these 2 pipes here to show off the spray itself, and as for the bugs, 3 hidden armor stands inside of Chica's head are going to fall down to the ground, since they're having their no gravity option removed, which is going to cause them to fall to the ground. After that, Chica's left arm needs to be reattached to her torso along with the cupcake in her hand. Now to start with the arm, an item replace command is going to power when I click on this interaction, which is then going to remove both the leggings and the boots from the armor stand. Then to put it into Chica's arm socket, I've placed another armor stand over where the left arm would be, which is then going to equip the same yellow armor when I click a second interaction, which is going to be over this spot. However, instead of just having one armor stand disappear and another one reappear, when I click over this first interaction, a teleport command is going to put a separate armor stand right in front of me, which is also going to be equipped with the same yellow armor. Now this makes it seem like I'm actually holding onto Chica's arm once I pick it up, and is going to follow my view until I place it down next to Chica. The same thing goes with the cupcake right after that, where I just need to click on it on the counter to pick it up, and then the same armor stand than before is going to put the item on its head. Then after that I can click on another interaction just above Chica's arm to put the cupcake on her plate, which is then going to put the cupcake plate over Chica's hand. It's a small detail that doesn't really need to be added, but it makes things look a whole lot better instead of just having things pop in and out of existence. Now I'm going to skip over the next step as it just involves using the Chemispray again, so I can move on to what happens after that, which is a little more complicated. After the Chemispray is used for a second time, the cupcake is going to jump off of the plate and starts jumping around the room on its own. Now to recreate this, I thought about using a normal Minecraft mob to move the armor stand around, however I've decided with manually teleporting the entity around myself. So here I have a few different command block chains, with each one representing a different area where the cupcake can show up. Now the commands themselves are actually the exact same as what got the roaches to move around, where each one is once again teleporting the armor stand relative to its current position. And out of the 4 animation cycles, the first one is definitely the most simple, as it just has the cupcake fall off the plate and then run to the side of the room. However, instead of ending it there and then, the next cycle is going to start right after that, where now the cupcake has appeared in a new position before moving on to the next one right after. So by having each animation play within the same scoreboard timer, I'm able to set up a randomizer every time a cycle ends, which is then going to move the cupcake to a new spot every time. Now each cycle ends with its own set of numbers, but each one is going to power the same randomizer to roll a number between 1 and 3, which is then going to set the scoreboard back to the number needed to start any of the 3 cycles again. But finally, to finish up the entire sequence, I've added a secondary animation to the cupcake, which is going to slightly teleport it up and down, that way it actually looks like it's bouncing around the room. But to actually pick up the cupcake itself, what I've done is placed another interaction over it, which is teleporting over it at all times. That way once it's in reach, all I have to do is click on it to pick it up, and then I'm able to place it back on the cupcake plate again, which is then going to complete the sequence. This is then going to start the final command, which is then going to open up the pizza box here, where I'm then able to eat one of the slices, which is then going to finally end the game. I know I just made the last part sound a lot more complicated than it actually is, but it's really just teleporting entities around manually that takes up the most time in these builds. With that being said though, the ending result was definitely worth it, as this sequence is easily my favorite part in this entire build so far. So with the gameplay now finished, I've started setting up the jump scare by making a second model of Chica just on top of the play area like how I did with Bonnie. Now just like with Bonnie, the only real animation that happens is around their head, so it was pretty straightforward to set up. However, since there's also the beak to go along with it, I had to double the amount of command blocks to rotate both armor stands in the exact same way. And with the full thing put together, the jump scare is going to look like this. I've now gone ahead and completely finished the entire level by adding in all of the jump scare triggers, the voice lines, and the sound effects again. Now since I went over the sound effects for Bonnie's level, I want to explain how the voice lines are going to work, since they might not be done in the way that you think. Now the text itself is simply sent by using a tellraw command, which has the voice line all typed out and in the color that I want it to show up as. However, at the start of the command is an execute command, which is going to power the block when a timer hits a specific number. So this is how I'm able to have multiple voice lines pop up in a row, as a while after the first one has been sent, the next one is going to power right after. Then once all of the instructions for a specific level have been sent, the scoreboard timer is then going to reset to stop it from counting up higher than needed. Now this isn't the case for all of the voice lines, as most of them are only going to power after a certain action is done or before the start of a next step. However, since this might cause voice lines to overlap or go on longer than they should, there's occasionally going to be another command block which is going to reset the score when a new task has been started. That way the previous voice line doesn't keep on going and says completely different things than what I actually need to do. So that now completely wraps up the second parts and service level with a total of 338 command blocks. With that being said though, there's still 2 more animatronics left to add, so let's go ahead and take a look at Freddy himself in Parts and Service Level 3. Out of all of the levels from Help Wanted, Freddy's one was easily the one I was most looking forward to, as I would say it's one of the most detailed and involved of the 4. For the room itself though, I wanted to put this inside a backstage-like area with lots of desks and tools, and I even decided to throw a few mascot heads on the shelves. Now Freddy's model was definitely the easiest animatronic to recreate so far, as not only does he just use default leather armor, but his only unique features are his top hat and microphone. Even with that though, I still think Freddy turned out really well. Before getting to the exciting part of the level, the first task is to remove a hat from Freddy's mouth, which I've made by using a red nether brick slab on top of an armor stand. And like you guessed, I just need to click on it to interact with it. However, instead of coming out instantly, it needs a second interaction, as right now it's only tilted to the side a bit. But when I click on it again, the cap score is going to get set to 3, and I've finally been given the item, and I can then throw it in the lost and found bin. Now here's where things get interesting, as I next need Freddy's chest to flip open when I interact with his bow tie. So when I do that, 3 teleport commands are going to move each part of Freddy's chest to the left, and then rotate it to face behind him by having this first one face a certain set of coordinates. And since armor stands don't instantly teleport but instead just move to their next position really quickly, there's no animation needed to be set up, as the game has pretty much already done it for me. So from here on out, the rest of the minigame is all going to be taking place inside this small area behind the first chest plate, where I've put an upscaled concrete block to cover the other armor stands behind it. So before adding in any other gameplay, I need to add in Freddy's endoskeleton itself, so that way I'm able to set up the different prompts around it. And when I said that this level was the most involved, this is exactly what I was talking about, as it was a lot of fun to mess around with different blocks and player heads to recreate all of these machine parts. Now most of it is just for decoration, but there are a few items that I'm going to need to take out or even avoid interacting with completely. The main one that you notice right away is the safety latch, which keeps on swinging from side to side. Now I haven't added in its main gameplay mechanic yet, so this brick of command blocks here is full of animation frames which moves the armor stand's head to move the lever left and right. I will eventually add an interaction entity to go along with this, but for now it's a lot easier if I do everything else first. Most of this is things that we've seen many times already, like just clicking over an object to remove it and then pick it up, and then to place it in the bin to move on to the next step. The same thing goes with the music box, which comes right after. However, instead of just throwing it away, there's another interaction over this left desk, which is going to place it on a small invisible armor stand next to all of these replacements. Now though the commands are simple enough, Getting this right during the gameplay is going to be a lot more challenging, as I've set up these interactions to be pixel perfect. That way if I slightly click outside the hitbox, I'll hit another interaction, which is then going to trigger the jump scare. Again, I'm going to be leaving this until the very end, so going back to the music box, the moment I pick it up, it's then going to pause the safety latch by stopping the scoreboard that makes it work in the first place. Now by doing this, I then have access to the button on Freddy's endoskeleton, where pushing it is then going to move the safety latch back to the middle, where now the shoe armor stand is going to teleport down slightly, so that way it's in a way where I can then interact with it. So far everything has been pretty straightforward, but to make sure that I actually have to take my time with each step and do it in the right order, all of these command blocks have some sort of execute command connected to them, which stops the next from powering unless the score is set to 1 or if an armor stand is holding a certain item. If I clicked on the shoe interaction for example before doing the 2 steps before it, another command would then start the jump scare timer, which would then end the game. The next bit is slightly more advanced, as now I need to add in the sequence where I drop the music box when I try to replace it. So after the shoe has been thrown away, a new interaction is going to teleport on top of the original music box, so that way I'm able to pick up the same one than before. Now the rest of them have also got interactions added to them, however I'm not able to pick these up until I drop the original one first. And getting the box to drop uses the exact same commands as the roaches from when I used the chemi spray in Chica's level. So when this command block sees that I've put the original box back in its place, it's then going to cause a new armor stand to have its gravity removed. Now since the armor stand is going to be there at all times, it's going to stay invisible until it equips the new box head and falls to the ground as if I dropped it. Then finally, at the exact same time that this happens, Freddy's player head is going to get swapped out for one with red eyes to indicate that I'm now in a lot more trouble. This is where I'm finally able to pick up the other music boxes, as I still need to replace it and put it back inside of Freddy. However, there is a twist to this mechanic, as moving too quickly will cause the music box to fall to the floor again. And this is something that I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was going to make work, where I've now come up with something that I think fits really well. So instead of having a system that detects how quickly I look around my screen, I've set up a randomizer with a 2 in 3 chance of dropping an extra music box again. So this is going to keep on powering every time I have the item in my hand and interact with the original music box prompt again, and is going to keep on wasting them until that scoreboard matches 3. It might seem unfair that this entire sequence relies on RNG and luck to beat, but I think that it manages to make it more tense while still making me take my time with it. However, once I do eventually get lucky enough and put the music box back in place, it's then going to end the sequence where I can then move on to the final step. However, if I do get really unlucky and drop all 6 of the music boxes, Freddy is just going to instantly jump scare me, as there's nothing more that I'm really able to do. But this now leaves us with the best part of the minigame for last, which is where a prompt gets added over Freddy's nose, which is then going to close his chest cavity once I interact with it, and then ends the entire game. So now let's go ahead and wrap things up by taking a look at all of the additional features that I talked about at the very start of this level. Starting with the jump scare triggers, there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, as all of this powers the exact same commands. Most of them are caused by doing things in the wrong order, but the main ones that I've now added are 2 different interaction entities, with one being behind everything and one moving along with the safety latch. So now if I click on any other area, or if the safety latch gets in the way, it's then going to recreate the same thing that happens if I were to touch Freddy's wiring while playing in VR. There's also a new timer that starts the moment I drop the first music box, which is going to limit the amount of time I can spend trying to put a new one in. This one doesn't really mean as much though, as again, this sequence really relies on RNG to beat. Now the jump scare itself is slightly more detailed than the rest, as instead of just having Freddy's head shake rapidly, he leans in towards the player with his arms out, almost as if he's trying to give a hug. And this took a little longer to set up, as both the arms and the head need to move on their own despite using the same timer, but the movements also need to be obvious enough without overdoing it to make the jump scare seem less goofy. And finally, to finish everything up, I've added some sound effects for the different prompts, as well as some electricity crackling that plays from the safety latch. Now the sound I used for this is actually from a spyglass, and to make it more believable, I've added some small particles to play over different parts of the endoskeleton. It's not much, but particles are something I really want to get better at using in different ways. Now, instead of recreating the entire Toreador march for the music box sequence, I decided to use an actual music disc so that way it's easier to play a lower pitch version as well as a normal pitch version. And Creator actually works really well in both versions, where it both sounds like a music box while also being a song that Freddy could play on stage. Also, Minecraft music just happens to be really good anyway, so that's just another reason why I really wanted to use it. But that is now Freddy's parts and service level fully completed, with a total of exactly 333 command blocks, which honestly surprised me considering how I managed to fit everything on only 2 layers instead of 3 like the other 2. However, it's time to move on to the 4th and final animatronic, where the last parts and service level is with Foxy. When building the room for this minigame, I decided to be a lot more creative than the others and themed it around a made-up room which would be behind Pirate Cove's curtain instead of just inside another back room. This doesn't change any of the gameplay whatsoever, but it was a lot more fun to put together since I didn't have to worry as much about in-game accuracy. Now, speaking of accuracy, Foxy's model ended up being my favorite out of the 4 by far. He's a lot smaller than the main 3, but it honestly felt like Foxy was made to fit this build style perfectly, and it's only going to look even better once the final gameplay has been added. Now, the thing with Foxy is that he doesn't actually start with his mask on, meaning I had to add part of his endoskeleton instead of just his normal head. However, his head is still sitting on the desk to my left, where I've used multiple armor stands to recreate his snout, ears, and whiskers. So to start on the gameplay, there's an interaction that covers the entire mask, and clicking on it will then teleport the entire thing to my right hand. From there, and just like in previous levels, I then click on another interaction to place the head over the endoskeleton, which is where the gameplay is going to begin. Before adding any of the mechanics though, the first and most important feature of the entire level are Foxy's animations. Instead of being a still character throughout the entire minigame, Foxy is constantly twisting his body from left to right while swinging his hook up and down. To recreate this mechanic, I'm using the exact same type of teleport command that moves an entity relative to its current position, but instead of moving it, it's only going to be spinning around on a set axis. So Foxy's main body is acting as the anchor point for everything, where it's spinning in a slow counterclockwise order while the rest of the armor stands connected to it are all teleporting relative to the main body. However, instead of spinning each one individually, each one is rotated to face the same direction as the original armor stand, making the entire body rotate while keeping everything together. And with the way things are set up right now, this is all that's going to happen, where both the head and the body are spinning around in opposite directions. Now obviously it's not going to stay like this when the gameplay is finished, but with a proper scoreboard timer set up, I'll be able to time how long I want the armor stand to spin in one direction, before either stopping or rotating to face the opposite way. So with those proper timings now set up, this looks a lot more like how Foxy moves in game, where both his head and body are moving around at 2 different times. Now this is just a simple part, as the commands only need to rotate the armor stands from side to side, as the next step is now to move Foxy's arms and legs, which is going to need a lot more command blocks to work. The reason why is because all of the armor stand's legs need to bounce up and down while also keeping themselves together as one solid object. So each one is made up of 3 different armor stands, so there are 3 different command block layers that teleport each one up slightly, before then bouncing back down shortly afterward. Now on top of that, there's also this separate command block row right here for Foxy's waist, as the top part of his legs use brown armor for his shorts, while the bottom half uses netherite for the endo. So the way that the shorts are moving is by changing the rotation values of the armor stand's legs, while keeping the entity itself in the exact same place. That way when both legs move up and down, it looks like the kneecap, the leg, and the foot is moving up and down with them. And the final animation now works in the exact same way, which is for Foxy's arm and hook. Once again, the main arm is changing its limb rotation, but while also moving the hook along with it, which is a completely separate entity that's connected to the arm itself. But altogether, I'm really liking how all of this has turned out, and it's honestly become one of my favorite things that I've ever made. I've been watching this cycle over and over for a while now, and if I really wanted to, I could keep on watching it for a whole lot longer. But actually moving on to the main mechanics, I've now added 4 additional armor stands to the leg and the chest for the fuse casings that the game itself is going to focus on. Now the fuses themselves are all stored inside of these shelves to my left and my right, which means I need to find a way to open these up and take items out from inside of them. Now this sounds like it would be impossible to do with Minecraft's block restrictions, but by using a mix of interactions and my cabinet design from my Joy of Creation map, the top part of the shelf is able to open up by replacing the block with a staircase when I click on top of the handle. And here you can see all of the fuses, which are just player heads on top of invisible armor stands, where more interactions have been placed in front of each one, so that way I'm able to pick them up by clicking on top of them. Then to close up the drawer again, I just need to click on top of the same interaction, which is then going to set the block back to solid sandstone. However, I'm also able to open up the one under it as well, where once again the block is going to be replaced with a staircase, but this time facing the opposite direction, so that way the gap is facing towards the floor. So this is a really cool way of being able to open up different areas while having all of the objects stay inside of them, all while contained inside of the same block. With that aside, let's now go ahead and move on to randomizing the fuses, as I don't just want them to be the exact same colors and combinations every time. So at the very start of the game, 4 different randomizers are going to set the scores for each fuse to a random number between 1 and 6, which is then going to change one of the fuses to be one of the items from inside of this chest. From there, these command blocks are then going to put one of those heads on the leg casing, which is what the combination for fuse 1 is going to be for that round. So since I'm working with scoreboards, I can detect for when a fuse matches a certain number and if I'm holding the connected fuse in my hand. So for example with fuse 1, since the score has been set to 1, the item that I need to be holding for that fuse is the one called RB, which means that the color for the fuse is red and blue. Now all of these other commands are also for the leg fuse, but each one is looking for a different named item, like this one which is looking for green and red. All of these commands are going to let me move on to the next step when I hit the interaction over the leg casing if I'm holding the correct fuse in my hand. However, if I'm holding any other item that isn't that named player head, this second system with the opposite command is going to send an output, which is then going to power the commands to start the jump scare. So this is how all but one of the jump scare scenarios are going to play out, so the rest of the minigame is going to work in the exact same way that this first part does. So to not go over the exact same commands another 3 times, I've completely finished everything up until the eyeball section, which is what I'm going to be moving over to in a minute. First though, I want to go ahead and take a look at a few different things, as just because all of this works in the exact same way, some of it plays out a little differently. The biggest one is the fuse in the middle of Foxy's chest, as this one already has a fuse in it when the game starts, however it's just been put in the wrong place. So once I've fixed Foxy's leg, there's a scripted sequence where I need to take the fuse out of the chest cavity and put it into the arm one just like that. So this is going to happen at the start of every game, where both the chest and arm fuses are going to have the exact same player head until I swap them out. But now that I've done that, another randomizer has chosen the new combination for the chest cavity, so now I can go back into looking into the drawers, so that way I can find the last 2 fuses and complete the sequence. This leaves the eyeball as the last thing that needs to be added before finishing the gameplay, where the interactions are going to work in the exact same way that they always do. So what I want to do instead is show off the eye patch itself, since it does play a big part in this step. Since I want the eye patch to actually open and close, I've put a brand new armor stand over Foxy's eye and then put black carpet over its head. And just like with every other armor stand, the eye patch is always going to be covering the right eye when he looks from side to side. When Foxy stops looking around, the patch is then going to lift up by using a mix of teleport commands and merge commands to change the rotation of the carpet. And all of these commands work on the head rotation timer, so this isn't going to get mixed up with any other timer when the armor stand changes position. And with it all together, the eye patch is no longer just flat pixels on the player head, but a 3D object that covers and opens up to reveal the actual eye behind it. So up until this point, Foxy's right eye is going to be a grey and red dot to show off the endoskeleton underneath his head, but when I put the correct eye into his eye socket, the eye is going to change to be a yellow dot to show off the 2 yellow eyes that Foxy normally has. And as a bonus note, I've also finally fixed the mask at the very start of the game, since it still had the left eye texture on top of it. That's now been removed, so now this just looks like an empty Foxy head. And with that, all of the gameplay has now been fully completed, which leaves the jump scare as the final thing that's left to add. Now this works a little differently than any other jump scare, as instead of playing out the moment I do something wrong, a small sequence is going to happen where Foxy disappears before charging at me from the darkness. So what I've done to start is made a complete copy of the entire room, but removed all of the interactions, so that way I'm no longer able to play the game once the jump scare sequence has started. Now this is a lot easier than having to set up a brand new scoreboard that disables every single command block, and it also stops me from needing to completely hide the Foxy armor stands. Speaking of Foxy models though, I of course had to make a second and smaller one for the sequence, which is also going to be the one that appears in the copy of the room. So after I get teleported up here, this model is going to start at the back wall before moving in towards the play area. So if I go ahead and do something wrong during the gameplay, I'm going to be affected with a blindness effect before being teleported up to the copy room. And this is when Foxy is then going to charge right towards me. This then leads to the jump scare once the armor stands get close enough, which is where the game ends and everything needs to reset. And this is by far the most amount of command blocks needed to reset the game, as this block has 88 different commands that either teleport an armor stand or replace a different item, or just sets the scoreboard back to 0. And when adding that to the rest of the commands, this minigame now has a total of 818 command blocks to make everything work. And when comparing it to the other three, it really does make a lot of sense considering how many were needed for just the animations. Even the base mechanics have lots going on, as the game needs to randomize the fuses, know if I put them in the right place or not, and either move me on to the next step or jump scare me depending on what happens. Overall though, this project has been really fun to put together, and I hope that you found this just as cool as I do. But with that being said, it's finally time to see if I can survive all 4 Five Nights at Freddy's 1 parts and service levels in Minecraft. I hope that you enjoy it, and let's see how we do. Now just so that I don't have to start each level by myself by going through each of the commands, I've gone ahead and made myself a quick starting menu where I'm able to cycle through each of the 4 different minigames. Now you're going to notice something that I've never actually used before, which is these text displays here. Now since this is just my first time messing around with them, I'm not going to go into detail as to how these work just yet. However, I will definitely be going over these in a future video as I really like how these work. However, as you can see, if I go ahead and press these different buttons here, it's going to cycle through each of the animatronics, where I've also gone ahead and added a model of them to appear just behind the door. It's a small detail, however, I do really like adding these additions to my lobbies. But let's go ahead and get started with Bonnie. So all I have to do is select his level, and now I can walk into the doorway, and it's then going to start the minigame itself. So here we go, welcome back to Parts and Service, and of course we already know what we need to do, however the text is there anyway just in case I forget what I need to do for some reason. However, I'm just going to go ahead and get started by taking out Bonnie's left eye, and then I'm going to put it over to this cleaner to my left, and then I'm going to take his right eye and put it to the cleaner in my right. After that, I then need to press the 2 buttons on either side of his jaw, like that. And there we go, his faceplate has now been fully opened up, and I'm now able to go through each of the guitar tunes. So if I go ahead and press this button here, we'll be able to hear which one is currently out of tune. And from the sounds of it, it's going to be this last one that is orange. So if I go ahead and click on that, and then click the button again to recheck my work. There we go, we got it right, and we have moved on to the final step. So all I have to do is put the eyes back in the order that I removed them, so we'll go ahead and put those eyes in like that, press these 2 buttons, and then the minigame has been fully completed. The first minigame is always usually the easiest one, however the gameplay is still really fun to put together. So let's go ahead and move on to the next minigame, which is with Chica. So once again, I just need to press the button to activate her level, and then walk through the doorway, which is then going to take me to the minigame itself. So here we are, we have now started the minigame, where just like last time, I need to start by pressing different items around Chica, and put them in the trash can so that way I'm able to clean up the different parts of it. Now there are some interaction entities which are still a little bit in the way of the armor stands like you saw just there, however once you do find the right area, you are still able to pick it up and put it where it needs to go. So once again, let's go ahead and press the buttons on either side of Chica's face, and now she's jumped towards us and all of the bugs have started surrounding her face, which is very lovely. At least it's not nearly as bad as it was in VR. But there we go, we've now done that, so I can go ahead and pick up Chica's arm, put it on her arm socket just like that, pick up the cupcake, put it on her arm just like that. If I can once again find the interaction for it, which is around here, there we go. And once again, the bugs have reappeared, so just use the chemi spray again, and the cupcake has just bounced off. So where is it going to appear? Right there, alright. I'm gonna try get it. Alright, it's bounced off, fine. Where's it gonna be? Right there. If I can grab it, there we go, got it. And just put it back on the cupcake tray, just like that. And let's go ahead and eat the pizza so that way we don't annoy Chica and just end the minigame like that. So they are really quick. However, again, these minigames are a whole lot of fun to play through, even if they are just smaller minigames compared to the larger projects that I've worked on in the past. But let's not waste any more time and go ahead and move on to the third parts and service level, with that being Freddy. So let's go ahead and get started with this one, and this is probably my favorite out of all of them. I know I said that Foxy was my favorite model, however, as far as gameplay is concerned, Freddy's is definitely my favorite out of the four. So let's just go ahead and get started by removing his hat just like that and then putting it in the recycling bin, or I guess it would be the lost and found bin, but we both know what it really is. Go ahead and open up his bow tie, and here we are. We now have access to his chest cavity. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the watch. However, I'm going to wait for the safety latch to get out the way so that way I don't accidentally get jump scared. There we go. And now let's go ahead and grab the music box. I still have enough space to click the button so I shouldn't get in the way of the safety latch. And there we go, the shoe is now out of the way. Go ahead and put this in the recycling bin. And now I can put the music box back in its place. Now let's go ahead and see how lucky I am going to get with this. There's been times where sometimes I'll do it on my first attempt. There'll be times where I never get it at all. So let's just see how this is going to work now that I'm actually showing off the gameplay. So let's go ahead and take this one first. Put it right there. Nope, we dropped it. Alright, next one. Alright, not looking good so far. Really not looking good. We only got a few left. There we go, okay. We had 2 left, so there we go. We did get lucky in the end, which is pretty good. Let's go ahead and honk his nose. And that has now completed the third parts and service minigame. And so this now just leaves Foxy as the last animatronic that we need to take a look at. Now, it wouldn't be surprising if I told you that I actually had a lot of problems with bug fixes when it came to Foxy, as there are a lot of different mechanics which are still really finicky despite the fact that I've play tested it multiple times. However, I'm pretty sure it's at a point now where I should be able to complete it from start to finish, and if there are any issues, they shouldn't be that big where I can still actually beat the game itself. Let's just go ahead and start by putting the mask over his endoskeleton, just like that. And the noises are very loud. I do really like... I still can't get over this. I don't like patting myself on the back with my own work, but I genuinely just can't get over this. I really like how all of this has turned out. But let's just go ahead and actually get on with it. So the first one we need to deal with is this one right here, which is green and red. So in this drawer right there, it's going to be this middle one right there. Go ahead and put it in like that. There we go. Now we need to take out the one from his chest cavity. I'm just going to wait for him to finish his rotation. That way I have as much time possible. There we go. Alright, so it's been put in the arm socket. We now just have these 2 left to deal with. So we have green, blue, blue, and red, blue, green. So let's start with the green, blue, blue, which is going to be, I believe it's that one right there. Green, blue, blue. Go ahead and put that in quickly. Got that one just in time. And then this one is red, blue, green. So down here, I believe it's going to be that one. That's red, 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 actually. What's this one? Red, blue, green. Alright, this is the one I'm after. Let's go ahead and wait for him to stop rotating. There we go. All done. So now all I need to do is find the right eye and then put it in the eye socket once his eye patch has been fully opened. So the eye we're after is the yellow one, which is this one right here. And there we go. Just right on time. There we go. That concludes all of our parts and service tasks. And that is the 4th and final minigame all completed. I keep on saying it that these minigames are really short. However, these are still a whole lot of fun to put together. And they were even more fun to play through. So I really do hope that you enjoyed it. And you're excited to see what future ones I'm going to come up with. And that is now everything to do with the original parts and service levels from Help Wanted. This project has been in the works for just around 3 weeks, which I would say is pretty good time considering what I was able to do, and I really like how it all turned out. Now before wrapping up this video by showing off all of the jump scares, there is still one last thing that I want to check out, which might also be something that you've been thinking about yourself. And that is of course to see if this actually works in VR. So with Help Wanted being a VR game, it only made sense for me to try this out in Minecraft VR, where already I'm really not liking how big that body model is. Now, I don't know if this is going to work at all. I have made Minecraft builds in the past that were VR compatible, but since I'm using interaction entities, I don't know how different this is going to be compared to my other builds. But I guess there's only one way to find out, so I really don't like how big those models are, and I really, really don't like this. Everything is so big for some reason. Well, there's all the text on the screen, so let's see how this works. Because again, this only really works when you're standing in a set position, and since I'm in VR, I'm able to move my head around. So let's go ahead and see. Okay, well that worked at least. Also, I hope my audio is okay for this one. It's been a while since I've recorded VR Minecraft, and I'm doing this in a different way. If I sound weird, that's because this is a really weird setup right now. But that's worked. Now let's see if I can try and hit the button without hitting those, because that's going to get me jumped instantly. There we go. I don't think it comes across how big this is in VR. It's so much bigger than Bonnie in Help Wanted, because already the animatronics in Help Wanted are massive. This is just ridiculous. But let's just go ahead and see. I believe it was that one. Yeah, I clicked that one. I'm just glad the interaction boxes aren't as bad as I thought they were going to be. Cool, that seems to have worked. Okay, so last thing to do, grab that. Like, even that's massive. I don't like how big everything is. Take that one, put that there, click that, and that right there. Okay, so that actually worked a lot better than I thought it was going to do. However, I have to get one of the jump scares. I mean, I can't just go in VR and not get one of the jump scares. So let's just go ahead and do this again and see what this is going to look like. So, Bonnie. Oh my god. Yeah, that surprisingly worked really well, actually. I am genuinely surprised of how well that actually worked. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of them. That sounds like a horrible idea. However, if you do actually enjoy me playing in VR, let me know in the comments below and I'll see how many more I'm going to do of these in the future. That being said though, I'm really glad I did try this out, despite how scary this actually is. So now that I've played this map in both flat mode and in VR, the only way that this can get better is to let you play it for yourself. So in the description of this video, I'll leave a link to my Planet Minecraft page where you'll be able to download this map for yourself and try out all of the different minigames. None of them require another one to be beaten first, so you're able to play whichever one you want at any time. Now I will say that this map is still a very early work in progress, even with everything I've already done in this video. This is also the first time that I've ever released a project before actually finishing it, so there's still a very high chance that there are some glitches that I've missed out on. However, since I'll still be working in this world for future levels, I'll go back and update older ones while I'm also adding in the new ones. With that being said though, let's now finally go ahead and check out the jump scares. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is now going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it, as it was a whole lot of fun to put this build together. If you did enjoy and want to see more projects like this in the future, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on the next time I upload and can also help the channel to continue to grow. But with that being said, thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will of course see you in my next video.